From Wilfrid Laurier University, sorry Hugo, working with Michael Wilkie, working on lots of really cool physiology work now with lamprey. We have Dr. Hugo Flávio, did his PhD in Denmark with Kim Arestrup, working on Atlantic salmon smolts, and of course the developer and maintainer of the very popular package Actel. Everybody loves Hugo. You should read all of his papers. It's really a joy to have you here. He's going to give us a really good tutorial. I'm personally looking forward to it and follow along. Everybody, please put your hands together for Dr. Hugo Flávio.
I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience as I started to have to deal with data management. You know, when you start having things like your computer tells you your last detection was in 2045, you know that something is about to get interesting about your work. Let's see if this works. The little spin arrow showed up. Poor computer.
Yeah, it's been struggling.
All right. Well, I can make this work if that's what we have to work with today. So, yes, when OTN reached out and said, "Don't you want to do a workshop about data management?" I asked them, "What do you mean?" Because to me, data management has always been somewhat straightforward. And then I started thinking about the data that I did have to manage during my PhD, which was the outcome of some situations like this one. You know, you have someone very eager who wakes up with one idea and they just go out into the field, throw some receivers out there, and they didn't even think about what they were actually looking for, how they were going to treat that data. And so I used to be this guy, you know, the one saying, "Oh no, because I'm going to have to treat that data eventually." And it's always very bad when you have to tell your boss that their study is not that great. So to me, I have to start thinking about clicking on this thing 5 minutes before I want the slide. Data management begins before your study actually starts, right? That's how it should go. And I know a lot of you are early career researchers, so you don't have yet the power to make sure this happens. But you know, you can at least tell your supervisor there's probably a better way to be doing this. So what you really want to be doing is you want to have a clear hypothesis, objective, you know, whatever you want to name that thing, that's still what you want to find out. And that drives which variables you need to record. And since we are ecologists, this is extremely important because time has that annoying thing that it just goes in one way, right? So if you don't record your variable, you can't go back to spring and restart and say, "Oh, I have to record the weather as well," something like that, right? And once you determine what your variables should be, then you can start working on your study design. And it's these two things that determine what you need to manage. So if you think about these things before you actually go to the field, then managing your data is actually a pretty straightforward task. I should be clicking already. Because then everything will fall into the right place. So I have a thing here saying verifying Microsoft Outlook, and I'm not sure if that's making it even worse. Help, OTN? I don't know. I mean, worst case scenario, I can put my laptop up, but then there's the problem with the recording, right? So
I think we're good.
Okay, I'm going to click on it again, see if this time it... And if we all think about it, right, we all direct our thoughts to the laptop, it will... okay, it's kind of working.
Yeehaw!
Man, these transitions are going to be tough. I mean, if some of you have been to my presentations, you know that I do jump slides quite often. So we'll see how this goes. So I'll actually click on... So this is an example that I want to go through with you. I have two lakes, completely random, that I built up. And I've decided that, or someone told me, right, which is also a very good way to do research, is to just talk with the folks that actually live in these systems, right? And someone tells me that the fish spend a lot more time into the West Lake than the East Lake, and the fishers, however you say that nowadays, are mad with each other because one of them gets all the fish and the other gets nothing, right? So what do you think would be the variable that you would be interested in monitoring in this case? I'll click already if someone answers in time. Damn it, now it shows up right away. So that kind of destroyed my plan there. But the variable, right, based on your hypothesis that you need to be measuring is residence time, right? That's what you would like to do. And now that you know the variable that you want to be tracking, you can start thinking about how you want to tackle this, right? And this time I won't click on it, and if we have to wait half an hour, we will. Where would you put receivers in this place to determine if your fish are more in one side or the other? Can I get any interaction from the public? We're all friends here. And there's no grade, thank God, so you can answer anything. Yeah?
Grid?
A grid.
You can grid it.
So you would just fill this with lots of receivers?
You can space them out so that it's efficient on the resources that you have, but also have the spatial coverage to actually determine whether or not they're staying in the west of the east.
If you space them out, you have the odd chance that they might sneak through your detection registers. Sorry, you were saying.
I just said I would want to scale that map for making that decision.
That's a very good point. Let's imagine, just for the sake of it, the receiver range is something like this.
You could make gates.
Make gates, yes. Where would you make them?
Probably the two smalls.
Here and here? So you'd put one line of receivers, something like this?
I would put two.
Actually, I kind of should have see that. And you said you would put two, so 1 and 2 or 2 lines?
Two lines.
2 lines, yes, that's exactly how I ended up at as well. And why would you put 2 lines instead of 1?
You have directionality.
Directionality, right? So a lot of times I do end up finding situations like the previous one where there's one gate and then people want to find out if the fish was on the left or the right side, but you don't really know. You just know that it crossed the gate. Where did it go? You don't really know, right? So that's a very good point. You would have to do something like this. And then where you release the fish is a bit more flexible. If it were me, I would actually release them somewhere here in the middle so that I have one detection right away. Let me click on that right away. So that I have one detection right away that tells me immediately if my tag is working or not, and it also sets the start of my residency periods, right? Whereas if I put a tag, if I release the animals here, I run the risk that I'll never detect them, and I don't know if it is because they always stayed here or if my tag is not working, right? So there's this little considerations. It's Inkscape.
Yeah, Inkscape's killing us right now.
Sneaky.
And then, sorry everyone.
That's all right. So once you have this, right, we know the variable, our main target variable, we know our study design, so we can make a plan on the data that we need. So we need things like the tag and the fish biometrics, which tag responds to which fish. You don't want to lose that information. I've seen that happen. You want to know where your receivers were, but also when they were there, okay? Because I've also seen study areas where receivers are moved from places to places, and that can cause a lot of chaos in your detection, I can tell you that much. And then you need your detections, and that's really all you need to keep track for the study that you are doing. So, of course, this would go a little bit better if the transitions were smoother, but our little guy that said, oh no, earlier, spent the time doing what we are doing now, and decided, yeah, okay, 6 receivers should do it. I'm not yet ready to go to the field. First of all, I should make some tables so that I know exactly what I need to record at each point in time, right? And you can see it going there. So 1 for the tag, so we have all the biometric information. 1 for the locations, and the locations are these points, right? So they are coordinates, the place where you intended to have receivers. And deployments are a slightly different thing, right? Deployments is the positioning of a receiver at a given station from this time to that time, right? And if you're afraid that your receivers will move a little bit, then you could even just record coordinates as you go as well. But hopefully the location as the position where the hydrophone was intended will stay the same throughout the period. So now that we have all of these tags, all of these tables, I'll show you a little bit how that would look like for me. That line should not be that much up there, but we can still read it, so that's fine. So this would be tag information. What do you want to know? You want to know the signal that your tag is emitting, 1 or multiple signals, that can happen. You want to know when you tag your animal, when you release your animal, which can be two different things as well, right? Sometimes the animals are tagged on one day and released on the other, things like that. And then, you just keep adding columns depending on what your study actually needs. So you have different groups, you want to keep track of the lengths. When you're doing biometrics, I'm a bit of a fan of the idea that you just take as much information as you can, because again, once you put that fish out in the water, you're not getting it back, right? So if you suddenly realize, damn, I needed to count how many spots they have on the side, good luck finding it again, right? So in terms of station information, what I usually have is I have a station name, which is usually a short code, something that's right, because you want these things to be easy to work with in the field, right? I'm on a boat, I don't want to have to be writing, this is the station under the bridge by the North Road, blah, 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 right? I'll just call it W1 or something, and then I can go back and see what they are. There's two types of stations as being points out in the world, right? Coordinate points. You can have stations where you have your fish, you can have stations which are the places where you release your fish, and you can have stations that are places where you are putting your receivers. So you see over here, I like to have both, so hydrophone and release. And if you do have a type of array or gate, then you can also assign them to different areas. So for example, this would be the west line, right? And then I would have the east line as well. And I want to keep them separate because I want to be able to analyze where my fish was detected last. And you have the coordinates of those locations. And one thing you want to make sure is that you also write somewhere which coordinate system you used. Because I've had stations that end up in Africa or something. Remember, I'm working in Denmark. So someone forgot to tell me what the coordinate system was, and then I have to just, I think it's that, right? Until I get the right answer. In terms of deployments, that's where your receivers actually come in. So there's a serial number, which is important. You can't lose track of it. Please remember to write it down when you're working on these things. Again, also happened to me. And they are placed in a given station, right? A position in the field that does not change over time, hopefully. And you have when did you put it in and when did you put it out. And you'll find as you go through your data and your life as a scientist that writing these numbers accurately is actually very important, because sometimes you get what I call couch detection. Someone just forgot a tag very close to a receiver, and it's just ping, 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 ping all the time, and then you're detecting your fish before it was released. It doesn't make any sense. So once you have gone through all of these steps, you're really ready to go to the field, right? You have your hypothesis, you know the variables, you have your study design, you can neatly pack all the stuff that you're going to need for your study, you take it out with you, and you're good to go. And as I wrote there, keeping your data under control is a lot easier if you plan ahead. If you have a good study plan, then the data management is really not that complicated at all, right? It's mostly about not losing control of your study as it goes. Any questions so far? If you have any doubts as we go, you can also just lift your hand and we'll chat. This is more of a class session than really a symposium. So during the study, all you have to do is take good notes. Really, it's that simple. Take good notes. If you are paranoid like me, take photos of absolutely everything, right? There's so much cloud storage nowadays. Even if you don't have it personally, you have it as part of your institution. So, take a photo of the receiver. Take a photo of the buoy where you put the receiver. Take photos of everything, right? I'm not even kidding. Because, maybe you actually wrote all of these things right, but because you were out in the water, your book gets soaked and the number is not legible or whatnot. Sorry, microphone. And then these photos, and assuming you have a smartphone, then Google is silently taking coordinates of all your photos as well, which you can actually use to your advantage too, right? Where was I? I don't really remember, but I can go back to my photo and see, and there's nothing worse than losing the data that you had already collected because your laptop died, because you lost the hard drive, and for some reason the receiver is lost, things like that, which I've seen happen in the field as well. So as soon as you get to a stable point in land where you have an internet connection, please just upload all of that to the cloud. So you don't have to worry about it anymore, even if someone steals your computer. You know, there's so many things that can go wrong out in the field. Because you don't want to be the guy that will show up next. So again, this was me during my PhD working, and there was something that didn't match up. So I was like, can I see the field notes? Because these locations, they don't really make sense. And I got an answer. It wasn't as bad as that. But I got an answer that didn't really help me at all. It was like, oh yeah, we went to the field and we spotted 2 receivers. That was the extent of their notes. From where to where? What was the serial number of the receiver? We don't know. And that can take weeks to fix, if you even manage to fix it at all. And it's just something so simple, right, to correct. So, yeah. Don't be that guy. But regardless of how well you plan, while your study is going on, things can go wrong. You can have ice that throws your receivers away, or you might just find out that there's a place where there's a lot of boats, and for some reason your receiver is not working. And if you only go in there and check it at the end of your study, then well, that didn't help at all, right? Now you know you have a hole in your gate between the 2 lakes, and your study is therefore impossible to analyze. So something that I always recommend is that you offload your data, and as soon as you get to your office or something like that, analyze what you have. It's not like you're going to take huge conclusions of what's going on, right? We're not doing GLMs, p-values, nothing like that. It's just, you know, are things going as I thought they were going to go, right? Do I have weird detections in random places or stuff like that, right? And if something does look to not be right, then you have time to switch gears as you're going, make adjustments, and make sure that your study is still valid. Again, I can't emphasize enough, in ecology, time does not go backwards. So if you don't notice a mistake in time, there goes a year of data, and there goes the nice time series that you were building, right? And then, you know, just keep repeating and see what happens. I'll show you some, or I will highlight some things that I've come across, which I was hoping would happen a little bit faster. Let me see what's the first one that shows here. Ghost tags. I was once analyzing data for some folks, and one of the things that Actel does is it lets you know if there's stray tags in your area. So it sends a message saying, I found these tags that are not part of your target tags. Do you want to have a look at what's up? And thankfully enough, I said, yes, let's have a look. And one of the things that Actel shows you is in which receivers that tag was detected. And you know, this random tag was detected in every single receiver of the study. And I was like, now that's a bit weird. Because it's normal to have random detections here and there, but to have one tag that miraculously appears in your study area is a bit complicated. And after a bit of back and forth, we discovered that they actually forgot to include that tag in their biometrics, right? So they had a table and they were writing down, we tagged this tag on this fish, and they just completely forgot to write it for that one animal. So that animal didn't exist, right? As far as the metadata is concerned. But it turns out it existed after all, and we were able to salvage it. I've also seen self-moving receivers, right? Of course, they didn't move by themselves, but as I was explaining earlier, you can have situations where someone just decides, I'll move these receivers around. I also had a situation where I was not informed, but it was a migration study, and once they found out that all the fish had passed the first receiver, they decided to move that receiver further down. Which is, and then in my study, I had fish that were going down and then all of a sudden being detected back at the very beginning of the study area and then continuing to go down. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? This doesn't make any sense, right? So that is why it is important to keep your deployments separate from your stations so that you can deploy the same receiver in different locations at different times, right? So yeah, that was a particularly fun one to figure out. This one I've already kind of mentioned, couch detections. I've seen that happen more than once. This also applies for situations where you're activating the tag and then you use the same receiver for your study. But you forget to somehow delete or discount those early detections, and then you start getting warnings in Actel that your fish are being detected before they were released, right? Because it was when you were activating tags. That's just an example of something that can go wrong. And again, this is where having deployments with accurate start and stop times allow you to quickly discard that noise data that is not really part of your study. I've also had, boy, is this frequent, Excel shenanigans, as I like to call them. And just don't open your detection files in Excel. Why would you ever do such a thing? You know. You know, it's funny because I've also had situations where I've had to tell people that their data did not look right, and they were like, "Are you sure you didn't open it in Excel? Because when you open these things in Excel, they do weird stuff." And I looked at them so offended that I was like, how am I going to talk with this person again? But yeah, so I've had situations like that. To all my students, I usually beg they at least download and try out LibreOffice, which is a bit more friendly, especially when it comes to these timestamps and stuff like that. It also doesn't think that the comma separated values stands for semicolons, which is also something that Excel can do, and it can really mess up your stuff. But yeah, this doesn't mean that you cannot work with the other, like your biometrics, your deployments. Sure, fine, work with that in Excel if you must, if you don't really want to try something else. But just, you know, the detection files, just don't open it at all, like never, ever. I'm not kidding. And I've also had this one, I swear. I never thought this error would ever have any use in Actel. It's an error that tells you you have detections for receivers that you did not list. So yes, I saw, did someone say, "Oh God," somewhere? Yeah. Yes, I've had this happen. Now imagine explaining to someone that sent you the data, you know, you sent me detections for a receiver, but you never said it existed. And they're like, "That's because it doesn't exist." And but you sent me detections for it, you know, it's somewhere out there. So I've had situations like that. And these are all examples of things that can quickly, you know, just destroy your data analysis or make it take weeks, months longer. And that would not have been necessary if you had properly planned the study. Now, I understand some of these things happen by accident, as I said, so it's still important that we are careful about it. For example, in Actel, you actually have the possibility to include these ghost receivers in your analysis as an unknown receiver, and then what you can do is you can match it, so it will show up on the detection plots for each tag, and you can see, you know, when was my tag detected here compared to the receivers that I do know of, which was actually what I had to do for these colleagues that had an unknown receiver. Was I ended up having to tell them, you have an unknown receiver, and I think it's here in your study area, based on the other detections. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, we actually, sorry, we forgot about it." So yeah, that can make things a lot more complicated. So as I've been pointing to, a lot of what you have to be taking care of or being careful about is just correcting these little mistakes before they snowball and just completely sidetrack your analysis, especially if you are, for example, a PhD student or a master student who needs to have a thesis done after a given amount of time. I can tell you that spending time on these little things is really frustrating, especially when you know this should be a 5-minute job, right? Something like that. So I'm gonna highlight here a little bit how, I don't know how many of you know of Actel or many of you have tried Actel, so I'll just give you a quick rundown of how to simply prepare some data for the package. So as I've been talking here, you've seen me talking about 3 different main components. One is the study area, then there's a different element that is your tagged animals, and you have your receivers as well. And as far as Actel is concerned, you can convey all of this information using 3 tables and the one you never open, the detection files, right? So I'll show you, I think I'll show you eventually, or I've already kind of shown that before, so I won't bring it up here again. But here, so this biometrics.csv is essentially that biometric information that I was telling you about, the tag signals, the length of your animal, when did you release it, where did you release it if you have more than one release site, things like that. The spatial.csv is the one that takes care of the stations, right? So where are your receivers supposed to be? Which array do they belong to? Where did you release your fish? And from that release site, where would you expect your fish to be first detected, right? And then we have the deployments, which relate to the receivers, just serial number, where it was, and when it was. And as I've said several times, you grab the CSV files from the hydrophone and you just drop them in the detections folder, and you never look to them again if you don't have to. And the whole purpose of Actel from the very beginning, even before it was Actel as we know it today, was to just grab those 4 sources of data, do some sort of black magic with it, and you get your nice results on the other side, right? So, something that I had planned for today, and I will still try it, even though the laptop is a poor thing, is to just quickly try it out with you. So if you have Actel installed, if you have a computer, if you want to try it, I have prepared a very short example data set that is currently on the Ocean Tracking Network GitHub page. And so I'll leave this here for a second if you guys want to try and copy paste that and see it out in the wild. And then I'll try to run it myself as well. So we'll see how that goes. John, do we still have the web page open? Should I escape? Is that safe? I'll just...
Do everything at your own peril.
Exactly. I'll just wait for the cavalry to...
Yeah.
Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. I just wanted to show them the GitHub page if we can. See the Sora. Sora here. It's just a matter of convincing the thing to show. Yeah, this is the one. Alright. Does anyone still need the link, or are you able to find it? If no one says they still need the link, I'll assume everyone's fine. Yeah, it's up there, it just might be, oh yeah, that's even easier, right? So it's just github.com and then that information they have.
You just search Ocean Tracking Network GitHub, it's one of the first ones on there.
Here we go, cavalry to the rescue. So if you look at this, you will see there isn't really that much going on. It's just a data set. You can see there's spatial deployments, biometrics, and detections, just as we have been discussing. And if you want to try this out right now, I swear to God, I did nothing. I put my elbow here. I don't know if that's somehow caused the computer to move. Is there anyone that...
Yeah, it's a good time to take a moment to download it if you're trying to. We'll come around, we'll help you out with it. The download and the look through the data.
So there is a green button that says code. That's very easy to see. And if you click on the little arrow...
I already did.
You already did it, yeah. But I'm just telling everyone else. So if you click on the little arrow beside the code button, there will be a download zip option. So you can download it and then unzip the speeds and decide if you can find everything that you need.
That happened earlier too, so if that happens again, I have it on here. That we can use, it just doesn't have one USB.
Video and audio came back right away. avoided going too much into the weeds on purpose. These before and the detections after the time. So I think it should be fine. But if we go in early, we can have Thank you. Okay, sorry. So green code button here on the side, and then if you click on the little arrow, there we go. There's the download zip, and once you have the file, you can just unzip it, and it will have a folder inside. John, you might have gone back to your seat too early because I don't really know.
Oh yeah, you want to go back to slides?
Now I wanted to go to our love view.
I'll show you something. Take 3 fingers.
3 fingers. I was trying.
This is-
And like John here, I'm not a master of the 3 operating systems. In fact, I
We went to
avoid.
school for very different things.
In fact, I avoid the Mac OS as much as I can. So notice here on this our studio session, the only things we've done so far is I'm seeing something up there that makes me want to click that install button, I suppose.
Yeah, probably do. I mean,
Let's see what happens. So you will find it's a very, very simple script here on the side, and I moved to the folder where the script is. Let's just give it a second here. You probably have thought of seeing if Acro was installed.
it actually was going to be pretty informative because I don't know who else here has installed Actel.
Yeah.
So if you do see a little prompt on the top of our studio session that says, "Hey, it looks like you're about to try to use Actel, you should probably install it." That is good advice, and you should take it.
It's totally calculated, of course. We do these things on purpose. You can see it's somewhat big, and you'll find out why on the second part of the of the workshop as well. See, this is a very good time to use, a very good way to use the time too.
Yeah.
It's totally calculated. See, I was discussing with Hunter earlier on that I wonder if this Mac will have the SVG dependencies it needs as well.
That will be very interesting.
It is trying to install diagrammer, I see, so hopefully. But as I was also telling Hunter, Actel should be resilient and able to survive even without those things. So this will be a very nice stress test for the package.
So if you are currently watching the same screen that Hugo is, this is a good time to have any questions or anything you want to cover off.
Or life history thing.
So you said I've never opened the sections in Excel, but when you're making your biometric data, what do you use? You said you don't use Excel?
I personally don't use Excel because I don't use Microsoft and I don't use Mac OS either, so Microsoft Office is we record. I use LibreOffice, which is like the child of OpenOffice. OpenOffice itself has not been updated since 2014 or something. It died in the water, but LibreOffice is still actively maintained and is honestly just as good as Microsoft Office. It's free, so why would you not? But yes, I mentioned briefly, you can, for the small tables, it works. The only thing that you need to be careful of is the date format. And I've recently had to use an Excel, and I could not find, again, it might also be because I'm not used to it anymore, but I could not find a default option that gives you year, month, day, hour, minute, second.
Yeah, you have to make it custom. You have to make it custom.
Why?
Yeah.
You know, why would you not have the ISO standard in your software? You know, it's just, yeah. So of course, you can use Excel, you just need to be aware that it is kind of a death trap that you have to be hopping around to get, to succeed. A lot of times, I remember recently I received an email about someone who was trying to get, their data to Actel, and Actel kept saying, your biometrics don't have anything, your deployments don't have anything, I don't know what to do. And it turned out that somehow Excel was quoting the entire line, encompassing all the columns. So as far as any of the program would go, that was one single cell. that said biometrics, comma, release site, comma, and everything in one, and it just didn't work. So yeah, I've found from experience that first of all, LibreOffice does actually have an option with year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and it's just, you see, they tried to make it dummy-proof in Excel, and I think it was a huge mistake. So LibreOffice does not try to do that as much, right? So you see more of what is actually going to come out in your file, which when you want to say CSVs and stuff is actually, right?
So is LibreOffice still a spreadsheet? Or does it separate things out as a spreadsheet?
Yeah. So you have LibreOffice Calc, which is literally Excel, and nowadays they even have, one of the things that people used to not like is they got used to the tab, the ribbon kind of thing of the Microsoft Office, which was fairly new for a while, and other open source Office suites didn't have it. But nowadays, LibreOffice actually already has a ribbon, tabbed ribbon mode as well that you can use, if you like it. I use the tabbed ribbons for Calc, but for example, when I'm working with Writer, which is the Word equivalent, I actually prefer the old, with the little things that you click and you have the drop-down menus, because there's just so many things you can change that the ribbons don't actually work that well, right? And I'll hand it to Microsoft Office. One good thing they have is the search button. So if you don't really know what you're doing, or you know what you want to do, you don't know what it is or how to find it, you can type it up on the search button. But I mean, you all know how to use Google, right? That's just a tiny Google there on Microsoft Office itself. So you can easily get around it by Googling it yourself, which is, I kid you not, one of the biggest skills I try to teach my students. First, actually read the error codes. Don't just panic and throw the computer out the window. And the second is, if you don't understand it, just copy paste it to Google, and Google will know. All right, so I think we now have the warning there at the top is gone. So I'm going to try to load the package as a starter. It's going to sound ridiculous. What's the hotkey on this one too?
Command enter.
Okay, so it is loading. It loaded. It took you a second. Notice that I'm using the CRAN version here, and we'll go a little bit into what that means for what you are doing. The CRAN version is quite old, I would say, as far for the lifetime of a version. So notice again, I am already in the right folder. So I'm really just going to run that line, and you can see there's only 2 arguments here, right? You can't see the end of it, but that's where it ends. So you have time zone, and I remade this data set from an old PhD data set, so Europe, Copenhagen for me. And this is just because of the way how CRAN works. You have to manually say you want the report to be built, which is why you have the report goes through over there. So I'm going to run that, and you will see that Actel likes to talk quite a bit. And I'll let it go until it gives me an error. There we go. So there's already a lot of stuff going on. The first thing that I have to advise you to do when you're working with Actel is don't just read the last line. All of this stuff is here for a reason. So you can see there's a warning up there, and it says they are not available. So essentially, it will just disable the graphical user interface, which is not something we will need. So this is not something you have to worry about. And I can also tell you that you can actually run anything in Actel without the graphical user interface, because it has fallback mechanisms precisely for this situation, right? Importing the data might take a while, didn't. Number of target tags, 10. This is the first time you're given some information about your study, and this is the first time you should be checking your notes. Did I have 10 tags, or did I have 11 or 12, and there's something wrong, okay? Compiling the detections, multiple possible first arrays detected for release site middle. Remember, I'm mimicking that study area that we just looked at, and I told you I was going to release the fish straight in between the 2 arrays, right? So I've told Actel they can be detected on either one of them, And again, so this is Actel telling you, indeed, I recognize you told me this, and I will make it happen, right? So again, check on your notes, everything is as it should be. Matching detections with deployment periods, and it was at 8% when it realized something is wrong, okay? 6 detections for this particular receiver do not fall within the deployment periods, and it shows me here the 6 detections. If it were more, it would show up to a while, but then eventually it would give you the permission to just save them to a CSV file, and you can inspect them yourself. So again, if you have your notes, this is a very simple thing to fix, right? Did I accidentally write a number wrong on my deployments, right? Or are these couch detections, and are they safe to throw out, right? So it's really up to you to then, grab what Actel is telling you and decide what to do. You will see that you have some options here. And pro tip, if I say very much not recommended on a given option, you should not use it. There's a reason why I wrote that in. This one says recommended. But if you want to, as we will do today, you can see that I've put on the script the options that I have taken. And this is a very interesting thing about Actel, is that you can literally write down your options here as separate lines and then run them again and again and again. So you get a bit of a history of what you were doing inside your own script as well. You'll see that it's saved elsewhere as well. But so you can see that for here I'm choosing option B, which is discard orphan detections in this instance. I should probably have put not recommended on this one. You never want to do something like this if you don't know what's going on, right? Don't just press the nuke button on the whole thing. So here I'm going, and see you have an option as well, save the orphan detections, all of them, so you can have a look and then ask me again after I've had a chance to look at my data. So this is what I mean by Actel liking to talk a lot with you. So I've chosen option B. It's telling me number of automatic listening stations, 10, of which one had no detections. This is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Maybe your fish just didn't go there. But on the other hand, maybe you forgot to include some detection files in your locked detection folder, right? You will get more information about who it is or which receiver it is later on, but again, actually it's right here. So it's this particular receiver that did not have any detections. Again, it's up to you to go back to your notes. Is this something I was expecting? Is this normal? And if not, write on your notebook, I was running the analysis and this doesn't look right. I have to come back to it. Don't be like me, who then doesn't go back to it, and a year later the problem blows up in their face and they realize, I knew this was a thing. Which has happened to me before. Data time range, again, good information for you to check with your notes. Does this make sense? If it tells me that it goes from 1996 to today, then maybe something is wrong, right? Or up to 2045, as the cover slide said. And then we say, stray tags were detected in your study area. Would you like to save a summary to this particular file that you probably are able to see on your own computer if you are running it? My recommendation is always say yes to this. This will save a file to your folder that you can open and inspect later. You don't really lose anything by just having a quick glance at it. In this particular case, I've adapted this data set from one of the published papers, and I've only kept 10 tags, as it said in the beginning, but I think the original study had like 50 or 60 tags, so there's actually a lot of stray tags right now, right? I'll say yes, just so maybe we can have a look at it, hopefully. So that's done, and then, there we go. Warning, this guy was detected before being released. I wasn't kidding when I said that Actel talks a lot, right? But I've been told it's a good thing. So you have a lot of information here that again is meant to help you understand what is going on. Did I accidentally write the release time wrong? Or do I have some detections from before I released the animal, right? So again, you get some information, some options here. I'm going to choose B again, because I've manually, you can see it's only one detected, so that was me actually doing the forbidden open the detection files thing, and manually changing the timestamp on one of the detections just to make sure that this error would show up for us today. So I'll just command enter on that, and it's going. Notice that it also tells you what it did. So I chose B, and now it's telling me one detection form tag was removed per user command. And if there were more and you had chosen to remove from all of them, you would see a message for each of the tags for which data was removed. Now this is a fairly straightforward data set as usual, right? Example data sets, they're amazing. They always run as you want them to. We imported the data. It started working on the movements for the valid tags. I'm not really going to go into the details of how everything in here works. Most of it, if not all of it, is explained in the package manual. And if you want to know more, I'm happy to chat with you directly as well. Checking the movement's quality. It's telling me that I did not set speed or inactiveness values, therefore Actel is not going to check for those things. The reason why there isn't a default value is because imagine you're like the person here is tracking a crab and they are tracking a shark. Which speed value do I put by default, right? It's just so dependent on the species that it has to be the user to decide on those things. It does a bit more computation, then it starts filtering the valid movement, which in this case is just everything. So it was in this part here that if some movements of your animals did not make sense, Actel would prompt you, it would show you the table of the movements, and you would say, on row number 6, you'll see that does not make sense. What do you want to do about it? It's always you who has the final word on what happened. Sorry. It does all of the compilation of the results, calculates efficiency. You'll see that in this particular case, it actually can't calculate efficiency because it's just two arrays, one next to each other. And then it asks, would you like to save a copy of the results to an RData file? I usually say yes. I mean, why not? Doesn't hurt. This is actually what allows you to compile data from multiple studies and then analyze them together if you want to. For example, when I was doing my PhD, I was doing Atlantic salmon smolt migration, and I would analyze them 1 year at a time and then obtain 2-3 RData files from each of the analysis, and I would use the function data to list, which is part of Actel as well, to then bring them all back and work with all of them at the same time. Okay. Actel also has some redundancies built in, so if you run this code again after you've saved this report, you'll see that the name will change. So Actel never overwrites stuff that you've done before, which I've also learned the hard way is a very good thing to be careful about. So I'm going to just say that I want to save it, and Actel will go on not Fn command, although I was on the Mac. So now it's producing the report, which I'm afraid on this computer might take a second, but we'll see. Hopefully it works. I'm actually not 100% sure if it will. If it doesn't, I will upload the HTML file from my laptop that's over there to the repository, and you can still have a look at it anyway. While this is going, we have some more time for questions. Yes?
So it'll never overwrite the name of the report. So does it just save it as like 2 on the next one? Or
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll just keep adding a number to it.
can you put in the name that you want it to be?
No, because it's super easy to then go to the file and rename it. It's just because of that, right? It would be more complicated for me to give you the possibility to write the name on the fly than just, it gives the basic information. So it's an Actel report and it tells you the type of function. There's 3 functions, explore, migration, and residency. And then it just keeps appending numbers. One of the good things I like, if you don't change the contents of the folder in any way, you'll see that at the end of this, it will create an HTML file, which is also Actel residency report.html, something like that. And the number on that HTML file will match the number on the RData file if you always save both, right? And what I used to do was when I was finally happy with the results, I would just delete all the other ones or move them to another folder that, like old crappy stuff. And then I would just refer to that particular one. Yeah. Okay. Oh, look at that. Is there any more questions before I keep going? Scanning, scanning, scanning. I don't think I see any hands. All right. See if I can zoom in on this thing.
Command plus.
Command plus. Thank you, audience. What if the plus is above the equal sign?
It's still going to be a plus.
Still command plus? Okay. Okay. So I've zoomed in a little bit too much, but you can see more or less what's going on. So first thing to know, if your supervisor does not know R, despise R, has never heard of R, doesn't matter. If you send them this file, it will open on their browser. They do not need to know R. They don't even need to know it was made in R, which is very useful. And you'll see that you have a little index here on the side. This is interactive, so if I run my mouse through it, there we go. It should highlight, so you can decide where you want to go in a click. But we can see what's going on in here. Immediately tells you which function you used. I think it actually says that in a few different places. But it gives you the target folder. So if you go back to this a couple of years after and you only have the report, at least you get an idea of where maybe the data is going to be. And again, you have some summary information that you can again use to compare with your notes, make sure everything is fine. Very useful button. When things don't seem to be going fine, you can contact me directly through that little link. Hopefully it still works. And you have some information if you want to cite Actel on your paper. This will take you to our paper on methods in ecology and evolution. Study area, very simple one, right? So we release them in the middle, so it's telling me that the middle is connected both to the west and the east, and then that's really all that my study area is about. And you have, again, in case you lose your folder where you have your data, all of the most important information is also here. Excuse me, your receiver stations and the deployments for your different receivers, the release sites. You can see I only put 10 animals in here. If you don't have a group, I don't know if I had a group on this one. Yes, I had a group on this file. You can open the biometrics file and check. So this is telling me N for group A. This is what's going on here. So if I had another group, it would tell me N for group B, and they would be separate, so I know how many were released in each site. Array efficiency, you'll see that here nothing can be done, just because it's such a simple study area. The efficiency calculations are particularly strong for the migration function, because you have that assumption that your fish is going to move in a particular direction, and that just allows you to use a different suite of techniques that makes for some really cool efficiency calculations. I'll also let you know you can actually calculate efficiency for a given array. Like inside the array itself, you could specify, imagine you have a channel and you have two receivers close to each other, so close that they are one array, one functional unit, but still like one after the other. You can still tell Actel to do intra-array efficiency calculations using one against the other, right? To still get an idea of the efficiency within that, which for my case was particularly relevant for the very last array that I had, right? In every study, the very last array is always a problem, right? What do you match that to? Nothing. But if you do have a double line on that very last one, then you can still get some idea of the efficiency over there. Warning messages. So it doesn't matter how long it has been, you can still come here and get a little summary saying, this kind of stuff happened while the analysis was going, and you will be able to see further down if the user did something about it. It didn't show up for this particular example, but when you are analyzing each animal, you're going through it, Actel tells you this looks weird, you have an option to type in a comment. So you can literally say, I don't know what is going on, I want to come back to this. And then here it will show up the tag ID, and then what was your comment for that particular tag, right? Which I've found useful a few times as well. This is just information. You can quickly find, so this doesn't really relate to your telemetry analysis in any way, but you're usually going to do statistics after. So this quickly scans your biometrics file for columns that include the words length, weight, mass, and I think it's those three, the main ones. It's been a while. This code has existed for a long time now. But it's essentially meant, imagine you have this in millimeters, but you accidentally typed one in as centimeters, it would be like way down here, right? So this would quickly show you if there's anything weird with your biometric data. Now here you start getting to the cool results. Where was your animal last seen? You can see 3 of them were actually never detected at all. And then 3 of them were last seen on the western array, while 4 were last seen on the other. There we go. Actel is indeed resilient to this. So, how many of you have managed to run the analysis on your computers? Can I just get a hands up? Yes, so there's at least one in each table. Can you come to here? Do you get a plot in here, or do you get a warning? You get a plot. Okay. So this is just showing you. Why do you think I made this? Because of Mac systems. So I would have people coming to me saying, "This is crashing. It's not working." And I realized that the dependencies that allow you to create vector graphics were not there, and therefore the analysis would crash. So Actel is resilient to that now, and if it tries to compile the file and it doesn't work, it just puts a placeholder here saying "could not save SVG graphic. Please verify that the SVG engines are working." But if you have, you can check with the rest of the people on your computer and have a look at what these plots look like. Remember, and it's written here as well, even if something does not work on the report, you can still use your results within R, which we might have still a little bit of time to look into, and use the other functions, right? There's 3 main functions in Actel that everyone knows. There's actually quite a few more that you have access to that allow you to plot each individual thing and personalize it and then print it, and it's good for a paper kind of thing. All of these are detailed on the last page of the manual, if I remember correctly. So you have a lot more information. I'm going to skip some of these. I mean, you can explore them in yourself. And then here, for example, is a good example. Because this is a residency analysis, Actel calculates global residency for me. So at any given point in time, so for each day, where did each of your animals spend most of their time in, right? So if it spent like 60% of the time on the west side, for that particular day, it counts as being on the west side, okay? So you can see they were all released at the same time. This is absolute residency, so this is all the animals that were detected. Remember, there were 10 tags, but 3 of them were never detected, so that only goes up to 7, right? And you can see they actually all went, of course this is fake, they all went to one side, and then after a while they all decided to move to the other side or were just never detected again. This is an absolute. I always like to have a look at this because it shows you if there's any kind of mortality event where all of a sudden you stopped hearing half of your tags, or if there's anything like that going on. But you also have this one as percentages, which is showing me. Now you can start looking at these things. This is fake, I know. But you can start going back to these, and you go back to the idea, why did you even start this study? It was because the fishermen were annoyed at each other. They always thought that the fish were on the other side of the lake. And now you look at this, and you're going to go back to your fishermen, and you're going to ask them, at which time of the year were you fishing? Because it turns out that maybe your fish are actually moving from one to the other, right? And now you even say, okay, I want to run this a little bit longer, and I want to see what happens next. Right? So this also goes back to why you should be analyzing your data as you go. You might get hints as to whether or not you are ready to stop your analysis. So then you have, so we are already down here, individual residency. So this is just for each particular tag, which behavior was recorded, and you'll have one of these ribbons for all of them. And then I'm going to jump here to the individual detections, hopefully. Oh, I always forget I have to actually click. Again, I didn't write all of this stuff just for fun. so take the time to read it at least once in your life. Because there is useful information on these. But we can look into here. So this is each of my tags. Fun fact, if you have a tag that has two signals, like 4451 and 4452, as far as Actel is concerned, you will always be referred to by the lowest signal, right? So both of your signals would be here. It's easier to just refer to the lowest signal. So we can see our animal moving in between our different stations, and this stuff is colored by array. Notice that this says station standard name, which is literally just st dot and the number. The reason why I did this is because people like to have very long station names, and if you try to put that in a plot, your plot is gone, right? Your plot will just be the caption. But if you go back up there to the stations, I do believe I can actually check it myself. It's been a while. I have to actually click station standard name, right? So you can always go back to this and match back to who your station was in the beginning. So now we're also getting a bit of a sneak peek as to why that particular index there on the side is very useful. So for each of them, you have a plot. If Actel had noticed something weird and you had decided to change something, like invalidate a given detection, then the rim of this plot would become yellow, which makes it very easy for you then in the report to go directly to the tags that created any sort of issue, right? There's another level, there's the red level, but I'm not going to go there today. Notice down here, sensor data, if your tag had sensors, this is fake data, so it looks kind of weird. But if your tag had sensors, 1, 2, 3 sensors, how many sensors there is, then they would also get a separate plot here showing the time as a function of the sensor value as a function of the time, and you would still paint them by array, not by individual station, but that's something you can explore on your own if you want to. And again, just they will all show up. And one very important point is the full log. So this allows you, or anyone that comes after you, to analyze exactly what you did while the analysis was going, right? This is a carbon copy of everything that Actel showed you and what your detections were. You'll notice that the tables themselves and the options are missing just because otherwise it would be 2 meters long. But you'll see that there's information here. For example, warning tag was detected before being released, and then it says here that you decided, per user command, you decided you wanted to invalidate this, right? And this is something that you can keep next to your files. Honestly, this is something you could even put as supplementary material on your paper, right? And it would allow anyone to quickly have an overview of your data. In fact, I have a paper under review right now where I literally just slap these as supplementary material so people can go and see why did I do what I did. And then you have here, this is very important, user interventions. One thing that you can do is, if you're rerunning the same analysis again, you can literally copy-paste this block to your R script and then run these options one at a time. I have taught Actel how to deal with the cardinal symbol. So this is also something you can do during your analysis. So you type B, and you can put the comment symbol and write more stuff, and Actel will know to ignore all of that and just take into account the Y or the N or the D, whatever option you've selected. And if you don't write any comment yourself, then Actel will write the most appropriate comment for you, right? Just the default one. And then this is also a very important one. This is all you don't see, right? When you pressed residency with time zone and report, these were all the options you were actually saying yes to, which is just all the defaults. So this allows you, if you grab this line of code, you slap it into an R script and you start it, this will run exactly in the same way as you've run it on that particular day, right? And this is the end of the report. Again, so this file would be, let's see if I can, going experimental here. How do I go to the folder that has the, I tried. Wait, I have more stuff here on my side, maybe that will work. No, it's on this side. Okay. So just drag it.
Yeah, send it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
So. Oh, you good? This is desktop. Back to.
That works. So if you go back to your folder, you will see there's a new file here called straightax.csv. Remember, we did say yes, we wanted to save that, so now you could click on it and open it and see what was going on. You'll see that for this particular case, it's a bloody mess, because I've just told Actel to ignore all the other tags, even though they still exist in the detections. And if you go there to the top, you'll see it says Actel residency results. .r data, that's where all the actual results are, and you have the report. So again, just drag this into an email, send it to your supervisor, and both of you will be happy. During my PhD, something I used to do was finish my report, slap it on an email to my supervisor, go up one floor, see the results with him in his computer, take notes of what I should change, and then go back to my computer and do my own stuff. So it was a very seamless process that worked very well, I think. And so I'm just going to try to, again, see if I can figure this one out before John comes all the way. I'm trying to get to the, see, I did this, but it didn't show me the RStudio. Oh, it's to the side this time?
The RStudio's over here, so.
10 minutes left, yeah? Yeah, I've been, so it actually is turning out quite okay. So you see here, R is actually pretty mad at me, precisely because all of the SVG engines are missing, so it's giving me all of these warnings, but Actel still finished just okay. So something that I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask, so notice how I called it X, which is a very terrible name, you should probably give it a better name, but on line 3, I just called my results X, and I'm just going to run names of X. This is all the stuff that is now ready for you to just do whatever you want, right? Actel is not meant to be the final step in your analysis. It's meant to be the thing that prepares your data so then you can do all of your analysis without any more complications, right? So for example, there's a status data frame here that has a lot of useful information for you, where were your tags last detected. If this was a migration analysis, you would have a column for whether or not they survived. They actually crossed it, so I used to use this one a lot during my PhD. And it keeps all the raw data as well. So you'll see here, there's detections and there's valid detections. Detections is everything you threw at it, okay? Valid detections is whatever's left after all the filtering and decisions that you've made. So even if you want to do space models and things like that that require actual detections, you can now grab this object called valid detections and go on with your analysis. So seeing as we are at about 9 minutes left, I will open it to questions from everyone, and I think that ends the first part of the workshop. Does anyone have any questions? Everyone's ready for the break. See, no questions is usually a very complicated situation. It's like, either I bored everyone to death.
Sounds good. So, this residency function works with like gates, right? What if you have, sorry.
It's for online too now.
Oh, right.
Gotcha. So what if you have a different array design? Let's say what I suggested before, like a grid.
A grid, yes. So you'll notice that in the description of Actel, it says it's meant for fish moving through receiver arrays. So that being said, you can make it work. I thought we were going to have somewhere where to write some stuff, but so I'll just try to picture it out. You have your cloud of receivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your objective? You want to know if they are on the left side or on the right side? So long as your objective is related to where they are, you can still break them into different arrays, right? So you can still say half of my cloud is the west side and half of my cloud is the other side, and you'll still get some information going. The only thing, if you go through the manual, you'll see I recommend that you do not have different arrays with overlapping ranges. And the reason for that is because you'll see along the way it created movements, and you can even look in the results at the valid movements. It is essentially grouping your detections per array per time. So if your fish is just sitting in between these two detection ranges and they belong to two different arrays, Actel is just going to go way wider, right? Like, oh, it's here, oh, it's there, oh, it's, you know. So your movements might become a little bit less useful in that situation, but you should still be able to get some processing of the results. And you yourself can also, all of the warnings and errors are editable, so you can decide how much do things have to go wrong for you to care. So in that situation, you can make the errors a little bit more lax so that, you know, it takes really something really weird to go on for the analysis to stop and tell you what to do. Yeah, it has a lot of options for you to try and play around with things. Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes? All right.
This is kind of unrelated, but is there anything like this for range testing or any kind of function in Actel for range testing?
The straight out answer is no. A while back, and I know this is so, I don't know if any of you knows Yuri's package RSP. It does take into account detection ranges for the receivers. It still doesn't do the range testing for you, but you can specify what you think the range would be, and so that's something that I've always wanted to do. It's just a matter of me having the time. For example, for the speeds, right? The speeds are always a very, very complicated thing because the speed starts from the point where you said the receiver is, but your fish might have been detected anywhere around it, right? And that can lead, if your arrays are close together, it can lead to infinity results kind of thing, or very close to, like speed racing car, which is something that would be fairly easy to get rid of if we included the range of the receiver. So we say, it might be 1 kilometer between them, it might be 5 meters. And that would give you a range of plausible speeds, which is something that I've mused about, but it doesn't exist yet on the versions that are available to the public.
Okay,
if that helps.
Yeah.
We only have 5 minutes left anyway, so if there's no questions, maybe we can go a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so perfect. I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, I just want to thank you, Hugo. I think that you've really shown that you've put a tremendous amount of work in Actel. I think all of us as R coders have been in the situation where we're using packages and we come up with errors and we have no idea what they mean. And that's because as a package developer, you're interested in coding. You're not interested in commenting. And so thank you for putting so much time into that. I think it's very unique and very amazing. When it comes to, I just want to highlight it's really hard to know exactly what data you want to collect before you start your study. And sometimes that evolves as your study goes on. So I hope though that when in doubt, you think of these slides and you can go back to those first slides and see, okay, what's some of the information that I collect? Another resource you could use is contacting the OTN data team. They've put a ton of work into determining what we should collect and how we should standardize our data when we bring it in and bring it into their database. And so those are excellent resources, I think, to look into. And we do still have a couple of minutes. Do you have anything to say? I have one last thing. Okay, we have a couple minutes in, so I also really wanted to thank you for all of your kind of horror stories.
It's not over yet.
Yeah, it's not over yet, but I'm just kind of curious, does anybody else have a horror story that they're interested in sharing? And I am particularly looking at the OTN data team right now, so I'm going to pass them the mic.
Are you legally allowed to
I don't think we're actually allowed to say some of the things we've seen.
Oh, I think I always got one.
Hi everybody, I'm Naomi. I don't often get out in the field, but when I do, it's usually with Fred. And Fred's a great guy to go diving with. He doesn't care how cold it is, how stormy it is. He wanted to go diving that day, so we go out. And one day, Fred went over the side, and I was on board the Zodiac waiting for him to come up. and he went down to go tag some torpedo rays, which is a super cool animal. If you don't know what a torpedo ray is, picture the face-hugging alien, but electric, and it actually exists. Anyways, Fred goes down to tag these quasi-dangerous animals, comes back up. Turns out he went down with 3 tags. He came back up with 2 tags. He got 1 animal, and that was amazing. But we didn't exactly write down that he went down with 3 tags and came back up with 2. So when we were reviewing the receiver results, we were like, wow, those animals were there, and then they were gone. And like later on, he had used those tags, but we didn't write down at the time when he was initially diving, swimming around with the tags in his vest. He was pretending to be a torpedo ray. And so that threw a couple loops into the data for a little bit until we got it all sorted out. So that was a pretty good one.
Thank you, that was
Any words, Fred? Yeah, he thought I was writing it down. I thought he was writing it down. So that was one of those side projects that needed some sorting out for sure.
Tale as old as time. I thought you were writing that one down.
Yes.
What about the receiver method for, what was it, SBS? Just go, where's the Latin long for this receiver? Oh, well, I went on to Dunn's Cove and I swam out for about 5 minutes.
Oh,
And I turned left.
Yeah, then I turned left.
And you know, there's that little shelf, and then once you get off the little shelf, there's that nice flat area. That's where we put the receiver.
All right. Well, that was fantastic. Okay, so I think with that, we're ready to take a short 15-minute break, and then we'll come back for Hugo's second round of talk.
So welcome to part 2 of the workshop, and we're going to continue on the funny side of things. Like on the first one, if you have any questions that you want to ask right away, you're still free to do it. And now we are talking about navigating an ocean of data, which obviously, I mean, we couldn't get around that title, seeing as this is OTN, right? I mean, I had to make that pun, I just couldn't help it. So now you've done your study. You're almost done with your study. You've done your study now, there we go. And you go back, oh, that animation is going to be terrible. Oof. And you're back to your computer. This is a couple of months, maybe a year, right, since you've decided you wanted to study these fish in that lake. And what I found that usually happens, let's see how well this goes. This transition used to go very well on my computer. I found that as you go, you start getting ideas, and more ideas, and more ideas, and you completely forget what you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden you're just wondering, where did your favorite fish go? Or something like that, and you end up with a very frustrating experience, as I've seen a little drop there, because you don't really know what to do with these ideas, and when you're working on your own especially, things can get really complicated, but you know, what you really have to do, and the computer gets a little bit frustrated as well, but what you really have to do is just poof, and remember that you yourself said some months ago, this is what I want to do, right? This is what I want to find out. The fish spend more time in the West Lake than in the East Lake. It was on the first presentation, remember? And then all of those fantastic little angels go away, and you can focus on your idea. So that's really, you know, when it comes to navigating your data, the most important piece of advice that I can give you is just really just keep your goal in mind, right? You have a question to answer it, and you're done, right? Science is not perfect. It's about being done, and actually getting a report that you can give to the public is something that was discussed as well in the symposium, how to get your results out there in a timely manner. Well, don't get lost on the 30 avenues that you could have gone through just because the data looks cool. You can always go back to that later if you're feeling that adventurous, but don't lose track of your targets so that you can get to your results. And again, early career researchers, PhD students, master students, you have a thesis to finish. Focus on what you said you were going to do, right? Even when you know where you want to go, you can still get lost. And I'm going to give you an example of what you should do to avoid getting lost. Does anyone recognize this place? Apart from John, who has seen this. No, no one can recognize the place. Well, hopefully the computer will give me a hand here, and some labels will show up eventually. And look at that, that's Ottawa, the capital of Canada, right? What changed? There's labels, right? There's landmarks that you can actually refer to avoid getting lost. And you can probably see where this is going. I'm going to be talking about comments, right? You need to comment your code if you want to avoid getting lost. It's exactly the same as this city map that I've shown you. And I'm bringing here a comic from the Aaron Science, I think it is, that I had a good laugh at this one, I know, so nerdy, but still. It says, okay, you have to enter 1.75 as the Qt value, and then the poor new user is like, okay, but what is it? What is it? The guy's like, I don't know, no one knows, but if you don't set it exactly to that, everything's going to come down crashing, right? So what happened in this case? See, someone along the way forgot to comment what Qt was, right? And now no one knows, except for the fact that nothing will work if you don't do it, right? And this happens extremely often with code. You'll find that there's a solution to a problem, you know the solution to a problem, so you apply it, and you just keep on your merry way. And sometimes it's not even someone else, it's just you. 1 week later, 2 years later, go back to your code and you're like, huh, why did I do this? This is so unnecessary. And you delete it and everything comes crashing down, right? So I'll give you a funny example. This is not our coding, but it shows how nonsensical things can get. So here, I don't know, the colors don't help too much, but I'll read it to you. This is an if statement, and it says that if this particular number is bigger or equal to a time minus a message interval times 2 minus 10. Like what, right? And because I knew, so this was written by me, I take responsibility for the nonsensical part, I can tell you it works. It's just like Qt. If you take that away, the flush pump controller that this thing controls will stop working. And because I know this makes absolutely no sense, above this code is that paragraph. I needed to write all of that to explain to whoever comes after me that it needs to be message interval times 2 minus 10 or you're screwed, right? And I actually ran this through someone else and said, read this, does this make sense to you? And they're like, yeah. I was like, good enough. I'm not spending another 5 lines on this comment, okay? So comments, there's no limit, right? Just write them and take notes of what you are doing. And please just make sure that whatever you write makes sense. That's because it might make sense to you now, but will it make sense to future you? If not, it's not good enough. Will it make sense to someone else without them having to talk with you? If not, it's not good enough, right? So one of the things that you want to try to do is just, go beyond the obvious. See, I don't need a comment to tell me that this is converting something to a data frame. It's literally as data frame it's written on the thing, right? So, if I see a comment like this, I'm like, well, thank you very much. What if I don't like data frames? I'll just take this out, and then everything will come crashing, and I don't know why, right? While as if, now I'm going to show you the real comment for this particular line. And it says, treat movements as data frame to avoid data table shenanigans. See, that's useful. See, now I know that if I break this data table free, it's going to wreak havoc on my code downstream. Okay, so this is the type of comments that you want to be writing on your code. You want to tell people why you did what you did, instead of just straight out stating, oh, this is what it does. Particularly for easy lines. I'm going to show you a different example here. And just to tell you that a few human words can go a long way in explaining complex code. What's going on here is actually extremely simple. From a mechanistic point of view, what's going on here is just subsetting a table. But it's such a weird, complex data structure that it would be, for me even, it would be hard to go back to this line, read it, and make sense of it quickly. So what I did in my code was, in this case, I am actually explaining what's going on, just because the code is so hard to read, right? So here I say, check that the first event is connected to release. If not, exclude first event. If I'm going through this code, I can now understand what is going on here without having to actually read the code, right? So if I'm looking for a bug or something, I know from here, from these two lines, whether or not this is something that I need to be paying attention to, or I can just skip. This is not, I'm barking up the wrong tree. And again, as I say, the more nonsensical the code, the more it needs to be commented. This is one of my best lines of code. If false, run this. Will this ever run? No, are the programmers saying there they're like, what is this? What's going on here? So any person who knows any bit of coding and is going through these is going like, why is this here? I'll just throw it up. What the hell is going on? They must have forgotten about it and it's just useless. But if I include the comments below, then they're like, okay, I should probably keep this thing in here. So this says, this dummy line suppresses the rcheck note regarding unused dependencies. While Actel does not require SVG Lite directly, it is a necessary suggested package of ggplot, and I want to ensure that it is installed. See, Actel never uses SVG Lite directly, but it is marked as a necessary import for Actel. And if you import a package that you don't use, CRAN is going to come down on you. Actually, any kind of software checker will come down on you, right? So how do you make sure that you use a package but you don't really use it? Just wrap it on a false statement. That line will never be run, but now the checkers that go through the code are like, oh look, there's a line that says SVG Lite. That's fine. That's all we need, right? So your code that was silly and potentially going to be deleted is no longer going to be deleted if people at least read the comments, which takes me to my little Jack Sparrow cartoon here on the side that says, always remember, please, really, always remember. And I say this to my students as well regarding emails. People can choose to read the stuff that you wrote. They cannot choose to read the comment that you did not write, right? So, write the comments. Express your thoughts in that little piece of script. It's not going to do anything for the R code itself, and whenever someone comes after you, they can actually understand, why did they do this? So yeah, very important note from Captain Jack Sparrow there on the side. Now, this is a bit of a side tour, but another thing, let's go back to Ottawa, right? You can see the shapes, even if one of you was from Ottawa and they actually were able to recognize it, they would be able to recognize it from the shape, because there is a shape to it, right? If I just scrambled all of those pixels, it wouldn't make any sense. And the same applies to code formatting, right? It's a lot easier to me to find the roads, to find the avenues if I can see them, and the same applies here by just simply taking the time to indent your code, to space your code, to make sure that things are properly spaced. See, now I know this if statement ends here and not there because this is aligned with that one, and so forth, right? And there are spaces in different places that also help me to understand, oh look, this is a new argument going on because there's a comma in the space, which would have been much harder to see if it was just a comma and then the text came right after it. So just to show, because I get this doubt from my students a lot, I just included this one that tells you when. It's not all situations are here, but these are good examples that will give you most of what you need. So, include spaces on both sides of operators, be it the assignment symbol or an actual operator like bigger or equal to, and always include a space after a comma, even if nothing useful comes after that comma. See, this is still telling me I'm not subsetting any columns, right? There's an empty space. It means I'm taking everything in, right? So pay attention to these little things as you are coding, because again, going back to the topic, this avoids you getting lost, which makes it a lot easier for you to navigate not just the data, but the roadmap that you're building, right? So now we are going to talk about, imagine, you've written your script, you like your script, and like me 5 years ago, you're copy-pasting your script from folder to folder, because that's the best you know how to do. And then if someone comes along, you're also like, oh yeah, you just use this script. Now you just need to go to lines 357 and 403 and change some specific keywords so it works for your particular data, and you're good to go. Like, you're really asking for it to go wrong, right? I mean, you're changing things somewhere in a weird script that you don't know, in an unknown land, and if something goes wrong, then it's probably going to be a whole mess. It just comes crashing down, and you're done for. You can't really do anything. So you can see how this guy is here a little bit scratching their head, thinking, oh my god, if I need to do this for every receiver, I'm going to be here until the end of days, right? So not ideal. So what you want to do when you find a piece of code that you like, that works consistently, is you want to turn it into a function. When I'm teaching these back at the university to my students, this is where I talk a little bit about Harry Potter. Think about functions as spells, right? And it's fine to use magic, but imagine how much better it would be if you could actually make your own spells, right? I need a spell that makes me a cookie and a coffee and brings it to my table. I mean, how cool would that be, right? And functions are exactly that. They give you the possibility to create your own spells, your own magic stuff that happens at your command. So what makes a function? What's the anatomy of a function, as I like to call it? There's a few things that go on in here. First of all, the function name. Notice I've replaced these with placeholders just so they are easy to read. Function name, and I'm going to assign, right, I'm creating something, is a function. Fair enough, that's pretty straightforward. And it has whatever arguments you decide to. You can make 50. If you go into the function definitions of Actel, it's like a list this long of different things that you can change. And then comes the magic stuff, right? Make the coffee, grab the cookie, put it in my office, kind of stuff. And then you have to specify what do you want to get from this function. In fact, you don't actually have to do this, but if you don't, John Pye back there will probably come after you with a wrench. And then, once you have this, so see how it ends up there, right? Again, space your code nicely, and things become easy to understand. And then you can just call your new function name. Congratulations, you're a wizard. So this is just an example, okay? I was working on this, and I was like, okay, I need to make something out of this to make it happen. So let's say I wanted to create a function. Something that I didn't think of talking about until now is, please, for the love of God, make sure you're not calling it the name of a function that already exists. Don't make a function called mean, because then R will use your mean instead of the real mean. So one easy way to make, and the same applies to objects as well, even though R tries its best to save you in those situations. Something that you can do before creating any object, be it a function, a table, whatever, just type out the name of the object in the console. And if it says object not found, cool, that's free, you can use that, right? I always do that with my students. Oh, let's make some random objects. We make A, we make B, and then C is actually a function, right? It's the concatenate function. So, no, you don't want to be overriding that one. So we go through these things. So and then you're like, oh, now I'll just use capital C. Too bad, it's also a function. So you really need to try these things out before you make your own objects, because now you're entering the here be dragons zone where you have the power. Oh my God, I'm going to say it. But you also have the responsibility to make sure that you don't destroy everyone else's R environment. So here, okay, my mean is the function I've decided. I've ran this. Pro tip, if you do my underscore something, it doesn't exist. So you do that, and then you say it's a function. It has one argument, which is just, I'll just call it values. And whatever you name it here, you have to refer it by that name on the magic part of the function, right? And I'm saying, okay, x is the sum of the values divided by the length of the values. We've all learned this in school at some point in time. This is how you calculate a mean, okay? And then I say, I want you to please return x, okay? So if you guys have your computers open, you can literally just write this down on R, and then do this, and it will give you that thing over there. All right? Fun fact: if that has an NA, you're gone. That's why you shouldn't. That's why you should trust R for the most part. The function will still be there. I'm just going to skip to the next one in the meantime. And we're going again. This is a bit of a coming back. Right? Before we were talking about not getting lost. The same applies to functions. You don't want to get lost in your functions. It's actually even more dangerous because you don't see them for a long time. So if you don't write down what each argument is supposed to do and what the function is supposed to do, what's the output supposed to look like, it can get really complicated real fast. So for functions, you use this fancy comment tag, which is the cardinal and then just a single quotation mark, and you start writing. You have space for a function title called calculate means, and you have space for a description as well, which can have multiple rows where you can say, you know, I don't trust R, I want to make my mean function because then I know what's going on. And then you can see here there's some special tags that highlight the code in different ways. This is very useful. For example, you are supposed to explain what each argument is. Now, this function only has one argument. And in this case, it says it should be a vector of values from which to calculate the mean, right? So you create your own vector. That's why it said my mean, and then you had C, 0, and 5, right? So that's one single object as far as the function is concerned. So that's the argument description. And then, not essential, but it's always good, a short description of what the function is supposed to return, right? So just the at return, and then you can write it here. For more complex types of output, you can also specify what it is. Is it a data frame, a data table, a vector, that kind of stuff, so that whoever goes and uses your function knows what to expect on the other side, right? Think back about that comment. If I know that data tables break my code, and the function tells me this is going to return a data table, then I know I need to deal with it very quickly, right? Everything making sense on this part of things? So I'm going to show you a real example of a function that exists within Actel. It's a very funny function. Its sole purpose is to split a data frame. Say you have a data frame with 100 rows. You just give it the data frame and say, I want to split this every 10th row. And it creates 10 little data frames with 10 rows each, right? That's what's going on here. So it says there, split a data frame every nth row, and this is something you can do as well. You can kind of credit where you got the ideas from. See, I Googled, how the heck do I split a data frame every nth row? And I, of course, ended up on Stack Overflow. So even for me, if I ever want to fix something, if there's something that's not working, I have the link there. I can go back to where I found this idea, right? And I can see, what did I get wrong, right? And like before, so parameter x, the data frame that you want to split, and n, the number of rows to keep in each chunk. Return, see, important, it returns a list. Not a data frame, not a data table, not a vector, it returns a list of data frames, right? Of equally sized data frames. Notice it says data frames and not data tables, which is actually important nowadays. It's also not table. I don't do that. And in my particular case, because this is for a package, this is more specific a little bit. It has a keyword that R will recognize so that you do not have access to this function. Only I do, as the developer. Okay? I could teach you, if you want to know how to get access to these functions, just come to me and I'll let you know. There's a nice little trick to get that going as well. And of course, just because you have information up here doesn't mean you shouldn't be still including your own comments as the function goes, right? So this makes it easier for me to come back after years and realize, well, what is this supposed to do again? Oh, this is in case I want to reset the row names and stuff, right? And then it ends down here with the return output statement, right? Which I've created along the way. It's pretty much the anatomy of a function. Now, why do we want to, right now it looks like we're making it even more complicated, right? But now comes the fun part. You see, you can save your myMean file, a function, into a file of its own. It's separate from everything else, and you, call it mymean.r, I don't care, right? And you save it, and it's there. And you put it in a folder that you get, it's like your detections, you never touch it again. If it works, don't touch it. And what you can do now is you can actually source that file that has your function, and that loads the mymean to your environment, and now you can run it directly. So, of course, this is a very simple example, but if you have a function that takes a lot of space, now the script that you pass along to people went from 200 lines to 2 lines, right? One to source the function, another to run it, and you're good to go, right? I think I have a cartoon guy who is a little bit happier now. But this is not perfect yet. Actually, it never gets perfect, but it's not as good as it could be, and this is why. Okay, you have the scripts. If you ever so slightly change the way how the files are related to each other in their folders, it's going to break, and it's going to stay broken until you fix it. So you can see, the guy's not that annoyed anymore, but as it says here on the corner, good luck doing that again in 2 years after you've forgotten, right, that you needed to keep that specific relationship in between the different files. So this is not ideal, especially because different operating systems handle files in different manners. So what do? You remove the computer from the equation, right? So now I'm going to go fancy, and I'm going to save mymean.r in a GitHub repository, just like we did today. Well, kind of, right? And then someone else, there we go, someone else is going to download it, just like we did today. And the good thing is that now it's going to work, regardless of how they are operating their specific script. So it's not just, if you download it as a zip, then you're going back to the same idea of, the files are in specific places, and if you ever change it, you're doomed. So that's not what we want to do in this particular case. What we want to do here is we want to source straight from GitHub. Here you say, is that even possible? No, yes. So this is a repository, eventually. Yes, it's coming slowly. So this is just, you'll see this is me. Hello. And this is my lab code repository where I just keep stuff that I use with the folks from my lab. And you'll see there's a few different things going on there. And I'm gonna, there we go. Let's imagine I click on this particular folder, and that's going to open the folder for me. And the folder itself actually only has one file, which is still true if you go there right now, which is called std_curve for standard curve.r. Now, I'm going to click on the file itself, and that opens the file for me. But you still have all of this fancy schmancy graphical user interface stuff going on, right? Which R is not going to like. But you can see, you actually can already see the file is here, right? But you want to see the raw file, which you can't really see from here, but trust me, that says raw. So if you click on that, you are going to end with the file. Just the file, right? And you're like, this is cool. I wonder if I can somehow bring this into R directly, and your answer is up there. Notice that this link actually ends as a .r file. So what you can do is you can literally grab that link and slap it into your source command, which will hopefully show up in a second. Right? You know, whatever the name of the person who owns the repository, the name of the repository, whatever folder, up to the file, and then you just run the function. And you're good to go, right? Now, there's no more folders or file connections of any kind. It's just you're going to the repository and you're grabbing the file. And as you will see in a moment from my comic that should be a little bit faster, our friend here is going to be a lot more happy about that, because now we've made something that, you know, so long as you have an internet connection, you're good to go, right? And it's very unlikely you're going to break. You really have to try, right? And then I've found through my experience, people can break anything if they try hard enough. And you're like, okay, I've done my job. The code works for me. The code works for them. And that's all fine. You go on with your life. And a long time after, a really long time after with these animations, you receive a little email. You're like, oh, I wonder what this is. Maybe it's a prince that's going to give me money. So you open it. And it says, okay, from Hunter. Subject, getting error in our function. Hey, I'm trying to run your function from back when, but I'm getting this error, see attached. And of course, good Hunter, notice he didn't even attach anything. I can't seem to fix it. Would you know what's up? Thanks, he says. And this is a crucial moment in your life, because now you have two options, right? You either help Hunter, or you just pretend you never saw the email. Let's say you actually like the guy, and you decide to help them. So then you have to find out what happened, right? And there's a myriad of things that could have happened. Maybe you changed the function along the way, and you know because it suits your needs, and they are still thinking that it behaves as it did before, therefore it no longer works. That's a perfectly valid example. Maybe R changed. I mean, I don't know if anyone here has witnessed the transition from R3 to R4, but it was a bloody nightmare. So for everyone, including developers, maybe a dependency changed. You know, maybe you thought that data table was fine, and now they changed something in the way how it works, and it no longer gives the results. Maybe Hunter just didn't read the manual, which also happens. But regardless of the reason behind it's not working, most likely the usual outcome is you having to revise the code. And there's a problem with revising your code. It's going to fix it for Hunter. How many emails are you going to get tomorrow from people from whom it was working, and now it doesn't, right? And that can be really complicated. So you end up having to implement versions, right? And then people can choose to use version 1 or version 2. It's up to them, right? So at this point in time, eventually, in a second from now, you are, let's see, you're writing functions, right? You are writing documentation for your functions because you don't want to get lost, you don't want anyone else to get lost, you want people to know where Orway is, you know, all that kind of stuff. You are assisting your users because you decided to not ignore Hunter's email, and you are maintaining your code. So, and of course, finally, you're also keeping track of versions so that different people can use different versions of your code. Well, I have news for you. You're a package developer, even if you didn't know. This is exactly what being a package developer is all about. It's those different things, right? It's just you wrap it up in a package and you can get the title. It's like a little ribbon that you can use. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how you accidentally get trapped into this vortex and end up being the guy who wrote Actel, and apparently everyone knows me for it. So Actel was not built in one day, as we've discussed. I built it for my PhD people. I don't know what you guys are doing. So in 2018, Actel was not Actel. The name only came after. It was one script with 536 lines the funny thing, I didn't really know how to write functions back then. So it had two tiny, simple functions that kind of just did very small stuff. And it was used by me only, right? I actually found these scripts, so if you have interest, they still live. It's called package developer, telemetry sorter, my bad. It's called telemetry sorter v0.1. It exists with 536 lines. Then I found another one from 2019. It's still one script. It actually has 7 tiny functions, we're improving. Now it has 2,400 lines, but many of these, as I've shown John, actually comments. So somewhere between here and there, I got lost in my own map and realized, damn, I need to start adding landmarks to this thing, otherwise I'll never be able to fix it. But it was still used by me only. Oops, sorry. And then in June 2019, after speaking with no one less but Henrik Backloft, he said, you know what, you should consider turning that into a package. So I started working on it, and I posted this tweet out there. That was the very first time I and John Pipe interacted, because it was like, what is this? I'm interested, let me know more. And you will see that it actually took about a year, so that was June 2019. This tweet is from June 2020, and it says, Actel is now part of CRAN. And this means it's now available to the community. And dear God, what did I do? So, you know, contributing to the community is, I think it's really cool because, you know, I didn't think Actel was going to get a lot of views, honestly. I was like, yeah, this is cool, I can use it later if I need to. But if you jump straight to today, to 2022, there are 16 R files in the function, so we're up from 1. There's 180 functions in that thing, of which you know 3 for the most part, right? And I'm not even going to try to say that number in English because I'm just going to say it in Portuguese by accident. But there's a lot of lines of code. Many of them, of course, are comments, but not all of them. And the last time I checked, it has been downloaded 18,000 times, which is scary. If you're just the guy who was just making something to analyze the Atlantic salmon smolt migration. So I can show you what you usually see from Actel is these 3 things, right? For the most part. Explore, residency, and migration. Now, what is under the surface of the water, to continue with our aquatic theme, is all of that that's showing up now. So each of those squares is a little function that does a little thing and delivers it to something else, which eventually connects to your explore, migration, or residency. Do you know why I built the function that does this? Because I got lost in my code. I would change something, everything would break, and I wouldn't be able to understand why. So I built this. And it shows me that if I change, you probably can't really see the lines, but maybe on the online version it will be possible. This actually has, you see where the main hubs are, you can actually see a bit of a trace. So these are lines that connect through all of these functions so that I could go and be like, okay, I'm working on this guy. What's going to break, you know, if I do this? And those 16,000 lines of code that I showed you there is just on the R files themselves. There's a folder just as big for tests. So there's unit tests in Actel, which is something I'm not going to go into details here because I think it's a bit too out of scope. But once you have a package, you can build unit tests that. So how it works is you have a specific type of code, but you also give the computer the answer to that code. And whenever you change something, the computer runs that code and compares it to the answer that you said it was supposed to be. And if that is not the same anymore, you can imagine all hell starts breaking loose and it tells you, something is wrong, you have to fix it, right? So yeah, that's a bit of my journey as the maker of the R package Actel. So I'll open the floor to questions or life stories, things like that. Again, just wrapping back to the navigating an ocean of data. Keep your goal in sight. That's probably the most important thing you can take out of this workshop, above everything else. For your own sake, include directions as you go. It's like that story, where they leave the breadcrumbs as they're getting taken away or something like that. Or when you enter a maze and you have a little line so that you can go back. It's the same thing, but for code. Make your code resilient to change. That's something I did not cover in detail, but as you build your functions to a wider and wider public, you need to start considering that people are going to try to break it in more and more ways. And you're like, oh, this is extremely straightforward. No one is ever going to mess this up until they do. And the best thing that can happen then is having an error message that a person can actually read in English, which is something that I will give you for free. R is not the great at. Right? You get error messages and you're like, did I just summon a demon, or I don't know what's going on here. So I always tell to the users of Actel, if you find an error like that, it's a bug. Wherever you ended that, it wasn't me. So let me know what's going on. And share your amazing results with the world. I mean, I helped Hunter finish his master thesis by accident, just because I decided to put my code out there. I helped Olga Trella there in the back do our thesis as well for the exact same reason. And I'm sure there's a lot of people I don't know of that were potentially helped because I decided to put this thing out there. And there's, no one's paying you for this, but there's a different type of satisfaction that comes from knowing you helped all these folks. And yeah, so that's what I have for you today. So if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss, I'm here for you. I don't know how much time I have left. So, questions? Or thoughts, or life stories, or, yeah.
I have a question about, it's a question. So I'm curious about your opinion of putting packages that you developed on CRAN versus not, because okay, so say you develop a package that's like very niche to what you do, but it might be helpful for other people. Do you think we should just load CRAN with all of the packages?
How do you know that your package is niche until you put it out there?
Well, so say it's like public on GitHub, but it's not on CRAN.
Solid start. And then we've had this discussion in the developer world. CRAN can be annoying, to be nice about it. It has a lot of restrictions. I'm sure Ryan there would give you a workshop on that alone. But as of now, it's still the main hub for people to find stuff. And I mean, so long as the name is not taken, you're not taking any space, right? So just put it out there. If it's good, people will use it. If it's not, people won't. Whereas if you're just on GitHub, you have to shout from the rooftops. And maybe you're lucky enough that the guy who's managing the data acquisition for OTN finds it and says, you know what, we should actually give this a platform. But if you're not lucky, then it never really flies out, right? And mind you, even just putting it on CRAN is not going to do it for you. There's thousands of them, right? I spend a lot of time just, especially in the beginning, just shouting from the rooftops with my 100 followers that I had back then or something like that, saying, hey, look, I built a package you should try. So CRAN helps, but it's not everything, I guess, is the answer to your question.
If I can piggyback on that, if you do write a package, please do tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an easy man to find, and I always like boosting these things. On the Ocean Tracking Network GitHub, you'll find forks of some of the packages that we've really liked over the years, and if we co-maintain it especially, you'll find it there. So, yeah, tell me if you build something cool.
What is a fork?
A fork is when you make a copy of someone else's code, but it points back to their code. So then I have a version of it that I've frozen in time, and then you can always tell where I got it from.
Again, versions, right? So there's always a backup there in case I decide to destroy it and do something weird. they can always keep their own stuff going, right?
And another thing about CRAN that I absolutely despise is the fact that there's
That's
no
fine for sure.
there's no authority to it. So they can just do whatever the hell they want to your package. There was a big problem a couple months back, maybe like half a year ago, where really large, very well or widely used dependency was deleted off of CRAN with no warning. And that made pretty much every, yeah, it was like a couple months ago, and that made pretty much every package that we use stop working. And if you try to download it off of
got a
CRAN,
message.
yeah, like everyone's package just got delisted because this one package got delisted itself. So I'm a big hater of CRAN actually. But yeah, if you are gonna go on CRAN, make sure you have other places you're hosting stuff because they can do whatever the hell they want. I'm a firm believer in
It was one, you know that comic from that comic where there's a bunch of building blocks and there's that one tiny building block on the side. It was one of the dependencies of Tidyverse, and if you remove that, the whole thing just
There it is.
so yeah, so it was a dependence of pretty much all of the Tidyverse, which I don't use. Apart from ggplot, I'll leave it there so I don't become the hater of Tidyverse online. But you know, one of the reasons why you wanna remember I said somewhere, make your code resilient to change. And if you're depending on packages that other people built and are still working on, it can be complicated and it might give you a lot more work. That does not mean that our base is amazing and you should just use that, right? For example, the base plots are ridiculous. But yeah. There's a question here, I don't know if you want to go first. Sorry.
Just on that note, I was wondering if you, Hugo, or the data team have encountered the use of like package management software like Homebrew, Conda in the R verse. And do people use that? Is that useful? Is that something we should also plan a workshop around?
So I've used Conda a bit with R, and this was about a year ago, so it may have. So yeah, Conda is a package manager for originally for Python, but now it has added like a bunch of binaries for C programs and also for R programs. The thing with that is that you're really relying on everybody playing with Conda. So one of the problems I ran into is like installing dependencies with Conda. All of a sudden, it won't work because there's this one dependency that's missing, and then it all falls apart on you. So that was about a year ago, so it may have changed now. But yeah, it's not as easy as like Conda with Python. It's just a dream. It's super easy, but R, it's not that easy. And then Homebrew, I don't know. I don't really know.
I've only used Homebrew for Mark and RMark, but yeah, I guess I was, because Conda and Homebrew, they have this potential to create an environment. Basically, you group your packages and your software on your computer together, basically, so that you can run this environment. And so it could help potentially prevent your code from breaking, your package dependencies from breaking. You can even install like different versions of R in there and easily switch between versions of R so that if something gets decommissioned, like we were just talking about with R or with CRAN or whatever, then you can easily switch back to that. But it sounds like John has something to say.
I've been a Homebrew guy for about a decade. The best thing I could say, like to describe what Homebrew does for you, it is the old adage that if you want to make an apple pie, first you have to create the universe. It is the universe underneath the apple pie you're trying to create, but maybe you're already in a universe that you can make an apple pie in, so maybe it's not necessary. But if you are approaching your building packages and you expect people to have things installed underneath, or else it dies, as we saw today with the circular plots that Hugo didn't get to use, but now you guys did get to use because his dependencies and your dependencies did not match. That's when you have to start thinking about, maybe I tell people what I expect in a Homebrew file, and then Homebrew is this lovely program that goes out and reads that file and gets you everything that Hugo says you need before you need it. It is also another point of failure, potentially, so it's another thing that can throw hairy errors at you. So I wouldn't say it's for everyone immediately. And it is just for Apple folks.
So it sounds like to me there's some potential, but not enough uptake yet. People don't really know about it yet, so we can't collectively use it.
I would say if you do want to do, if you do want to do some sort of like package or management or like environment management, there's an R package called PackGraph that I've heard people have some pretty good success with. I don't know of any others, but yeah, I don't think Conda's really there yet. Just with it doesn't know how to handle the dependencies that R needs. Yeah, I had a really hard time getting Conda working with an R environment, with like all the geospatial stuff going on with it.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Here we go. We've not done that.
See, to give you some background, I have a high school degree in environmental management, not even regular high school. I have a bachelor in biology. I have a master in ecology, environment, and territory. And then, yes, a PhD in tracking animals in the wild. I have no clue what they're talking about. Now I know a little bit, right? When I started, I was like, Git what? You know? And Active was like, yeah, just put this on a GitHub repository. I'm like, cool, how do you make an account? You know, so that's the main problem you're going to find with things like Homebrew or Conda, or like, you know, people are going to look at it, and again, it goes back to your CRAN as well. If it requires more than one line, a lot of people are going to go like, ugh, and they'll just go back to Excel or something like that, right? So that's still a limiting factor. But you should also take this as a comforting that a guy who did not even do regular high school can make an R package. So you guys should probably be able to do it too if you want to, right? Maybe I pass to, do you want to speak? Or maybe there was someone with a question there, yeah? Question or something?
Yeah, so I have the question, like, I guess the question would be like, how do I know which package I should use? So there are like a lot of packages out there. I'm just new to like analyzing telemetry data. I worked with R before, but I'm new to telemetry data. And whenever I bring up packages with my supervisor, he says like, oh, I don't use them. Like, because like every package just needs a special input files or stuff like that. And kind of packages can be black boxes. Like you put a code in and you just don't know what happens and you get an output and you don't know if you can trust it or not. So how do I know which packages I should use?
Choose the one with the biggest menu. You would say that. I would say that. Okay, I have to repeat the joke for the record. Yeah, pick the one with the biggest manual. So that's why I built Actel in the first place, or you know, the script that eventually became Actel. I built it because I tried the few R packages and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. You know, there's some tutorials kind of thing online, but it doesn't really, it's not working for me. And very good point, I am very suspicious of code, as you'll find most programmers are. That's why they ended up building their own stuff. So I didn't know what was going on, and you're right, it's usually a black box. So I was like, I'm just gonna make my own, right? And then I realized I was doing the same thing as the folks who had built their own packages, and it's like, I know how it works. So I spent a huge amount of time documenting every single thing that Actel does, and also making sure that you get reports, that you get to know what you did, why you did it. There's actually explanations in the manual for things like efficiency calculations, how they are done, where they come from, and stuff like that. So there isn't, a priori, there is no reason to pick one particular package. My recommendation is try it out. If it makes sense to you, it's good to go. If not, try another. And if you end up finding that none of them make sense, build your own. What are you going to say?
I just have a comment related to that. There is a paper that was written, I think in 2020, so maybe it's a bit dated now, that lists all of the R packages that you can use for movement data. So if you really don't know at all where to start, I think it's by J-O-O et al. In 2020. That's where I started. And then you can kind of learn yourself which ones you want to use and then how they can compare to each other.
Anyone else that I have come up back there with some more wisdom for us?
I'll just make a quick comment on that too. Something that's helped me, which is not super fun, is like double and triple checking and creating your own functions that are independent of the packages that you're using to check the results and see if they make sense to you. And try not to be scared of the source code. Like if you really need to check something, sometimes you have to go into the source code. There's also a debugging function, which helps us sometimes to explore the functions that are being used. I don't know if anybody's really heard about that, but maybe that's also another workshop we can have, is debugging code, which might be useful in the future. But yeah, so it's tedious and it's hard. Documentation, I would say, is also definitely my first thing to look for. And then the second thing is double and triple checking, and the third thing is reading the source code, which can be kind of brutal, and I don't have an easier solution than that.
Yeah, that's quite true. I mean, that is something that I used to do myself for my analysis. To me, there's no worse feeling than going to your supervisor and telling them this is the result, and then going back to them half an hour later and saying, it's actually not. I screwed up. So I tried to make sure that didn't happen. And yeah, just running, that funny little example I had there that says my mean, and then the description was, I don't trust what R does, so I want to make sure it does it. It's not that far from the truth, whenever I'm running, I do that to my own code, Actel calculates distances, and I go with a calculator. Don't even trust the computer for that. Good old school calculator, put the distance divided by the time. It's like, okay, the computer is not fooling me yet. So it's really about critical thinking at that point as well, yeah.
It's not a very focused question, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of what creating sort of an ever-broadening field of packages, what's that doing to reproducibility for analysis? Because there's peer review of packages as they come out, but once they're, and maybe if they write a paper on it, but there's not really, I don't get the sense that reviewers are going and looking and downloading these functions, or downloading packages and looking at the functions and checking that they're actually, residency is being calculated the same way. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
That's a very good question. As someone said on the symposium, that's our worst nightmare. They're just waste. Indeed, CRAN does absolutely nothing to check that your code is valid. It only checks that it doesn't throw an error. There's a lot of ways to make sure that your code does not throw an error. So one thing that you can do for a given package, you can go, for example, if they have a GitHub repository, you can look into their test suite that does modular tests for the code, and you can see how much of the code is covered by those tests. But that's annoying, right? You don't want to have to do that as a regular user. There is, for example, I'm doing aquatic respirometry now, and there's like at least 4 or 5 packages out there that all claim to do the same. And you are left, which one do I use? And there is no good answer for that. So for that, you can thank institutions like OTN that have teams who are supposed to look into these things and say, that's a little bit outdated, or we know that particular, because just because one function doesn't work doesn't mean the package is bad, right? They got something wrong. They're only human, and there's 16,000 lines of code. But maybe, so these folks who have as their specific job to look out there and see what are the tools that researchers can use, they are extremely important in this field of ever-growing packages. So my recommendation for, again, it's essentially a bit of an extension of how do you pick kind of thing. Go to these folks who know what is out there, not just your supervisor that uses one and thinks that's fine, because maybe it was fine 20 years ago and now it doesn't work that well. In our case, with telemetry, we're lucky that there are institutions that can help with that. In other fields, there aren't, and I ended up just building my own code. But yeah, to check the validity, going back again to checking the validity of a package, there is a very slippery slope, I agree. And it's just, and you said, oh yeah, if they have a paper. If they have a paper, it just confirmed that the authors say it's supposed to do that. Because as you said, I don't think reviewers go and test every single and actually calculate the little nitty-gritty details. So I would check for tests, see if that, because if that, it's a bit about finding what is the stance of the developer, right? Is this a guy that cares about little details, or a guy or gal, or are they just writing and letting it go? And that's something you can see even by, did they actually write any tests, you know? Because if they do, you can still go and check what the tests do as well, because there's some tests out there that can just say equals true and it's fine, right? It's just like that if false statement, and then that actually tricks the computer into thinking you are testing that line of code. So it's really about finding out who the developer is and what's their stance on, you know, do they care for their code? Do they want it to work? And then go from there. But as a user, I agree, right? It's a very complicated world, and it just keeps expanding.
And if I could add something to that, you're not alone either, because like you have people you can reach out to ask if you use this package. I'd like to just advertise the study hall, 2 p.m. on Thursdays, Atlantic time. But yeah, just come in, ask, hey, has anyone used this package before? Is it any good? And if someone's used it, they could maybe give you some help. And yeah, so yeah, you're not alone. You can ask for help. Don't be afraid to come to the study hall. Just saying.
Anyone else that wants to express opinions? I don't know how much time we have left.
I think we have about 10 minutes.
I left more time on this one for discussion because I knew that there would be interesting things to talk about. But you know, we're all learning as we go, and just talk to people, right? And they'll give you a hand, even with making your own code, right? Because a package will not work for everyone as is, but maybe they can be like, oh, just throw a for loop on that thing, it'll be fine. Oh, sorry, I finished. So, just keep going, just keep talking for another 10 minutes. You have a question, good, thank you, you saved me.
So just dovetailing with that question about different packages, does Actel have any interdependencies, or are there ways to make it communicate with some of the packages like GLaDOS, like using similar headings for the metadata or the detection data? Is it a seamless? Are they seamlessly interoperable, or do you think there's benefits to doing that?
I absolutely think there's benefits to doing that, and John and I and the OTN team, that has come up quite a few times, but these things are always easier said than done, right? So when I built Actel, I made sure of 2 things: that the input format would be easy to make, 3 tables in the folder, that's all you need. You can make it fancier if you want to, but that's all you need to get it going. And I made sure that you got everything on the other side, so that if someone wants to do something with it, it's easy enough to, you know, change headings, convert formats, but I made sure that everything came out on the other side so that then you can use it, which like, for example, with RSP, right? So Yuri takes the input of Actel, converts it to whatever format he needs, and works his way up. Now that works well for Actel because it has this kind of workflow where you put everything in at the start, you get everything out at the end in a very specific format. More traditional working R packages, you make your own code and your own changes as you go, and that changes the way how your output is going to look like, which then might, you know, lead to a whole new level of confusions. But yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that. I know that John, where is John?
You left.
Left. I know that John likes the format that Actel uses because it's simple to make those 3 tables, and then because you get everything out on the other side, you can easily make a wrapper function that changes that to whatever format. Seeing as I made Actel, I use Actel, so I don't really know very well how the GLaDOS, or maybe you can. There we go. The guy. He was just came, I was speaking, and he came to my mind, Rising.
Yeah, I'm a maintainer of the GLaDOS packages here. Yeah, so we've had a little bit of success with like making the data formats that come out of GLaDOS go into Actel. There's nothing like official out there, but like John has worked on a simple workflow. So if you were interested in going from like GLaDOS to Actel, we can help you with that. We also have crosswalks for VTrack. So you can go from GLaDOS to VTrack without many issues. And yes, Remora, another package, we're in progress of being able to walk from GLaDOS to Remora as well.
Which again is only made possible because we're lucky enough to have an institution that can curate these things for us, right? In other fields, we're just like each other shouting from their own rooftop kind of thing. Any more follow-up questions, something like that? Otherwise, we can, sometimes people prefer to just chat during lunch or something.
Yeah.
If you want to call it earlier.
Can you make a center of activity function so that people stop trying to use VTrack and not being able to?
Center of activity. That's. I think.
You have to use the older version.
I think RSP does that. So it does the. One of the problems with those types of models and passive acoustic telemetry is that you have lots of points, but they're all far away from each other. And then your center of activity models and stuff, they can get a little bit annoyed because there's no connectivity between the detections, right? So one of the things that Yuri tried to make, succeeded in making, was add little fake points in between. So if your fish is detected here and then on the other side of the room, it adds a space of points, just in direct lines, not perfect of course, but it adds some points along the way that help these models be able to connect the 2 points, the 2 centers, right? And on top of that, it takes in a shapefile so that this line doesn't go through an island, right? If there's any land around it, the line will add some points along the way, and I think that really helps. And then it has, I forget the name of a Brownian bridge model, something like that. Yes. So there's functions in RSP. RSP is not on CRAN, right? It's an example, but it still lives on GitHub on its own, but it doesn't have as much reach, right? But it does those things, and it does some really cool models that I've seen. And the tracks are pretty cool too. When we were at the symposium, I kept seeing these GIFs of movements of fish, and they keep going over land. It's like no, please don't. So if you go through, so it's Yuri and it's RSP on GitHub, and even on the README, if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see an example of just the detections from the receivers versus detections plus RSP, and you will see how the line beautifully goes along the shore instead of just straight out. So, I would try that for a starter, right?
Just stop trying to use VTrack.
I didn't say that.
Take this away before you do more damage.
I didn't say that. You said that.
I just had one other note that I'd like to say about the stress that we've been kind of increasingly hearing about. Like, there's so much code out there, there's so many packages, how do we pick what the best one is? How do we find what a good one is? How do we figure out how to use it with our package? And I think sorry, I gotta take this off. I think it's really easy to want it to be made easier for us, but I think it's really worthwhile to spend the time educating ourselves and figuring out, like, how do we make data science more accessible to us? So how do we educate ourselves so that we can do the data science instead of relying on the data science becoming easier? Because when it becomes easier, a lot of things get overlooked. And so I just want to say that I really think all of you are doing your part right now. Like, you're here, you're paying attention, your ears are open, and I think that this is a really critical step. Is the education on how do we learn data science and statistics. And so I think that you guys all deserve some credit, and I know it can be really overwhelming, but just kind of ground yourself in that you are doing the effort, you're putting the effort in right now. And so I think with that, we can also really thank Hugo so much for this entire morning. So yeah, big round of applause to Hugo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.